name is Mike Dierkop, and we're going to talk briefly today about the Electoral College. So the purpose of my speech, number one, is to discuss pro and con sides of a controversial issue, and in this case, it happens to be the Electoral College. However, though, the goal of my presentation is for you, the audience, to not know what side I'm on. So with that said, we have to synthesize some basic information. Firstly, what is the Electoral College? Well, essentially, the Electoral College is a group of 538 people, or representatives of what? Let's see, there we are, throughout the nation who cast votes to elect the United States President and Vice President. And from each state in which they reside, they have a set number of electoral votes, and that number is determined by how many people live within their state. And with that said, how that process kind of works. Well, who votes? So people who meet a set criteria that's established on a governmental level, essentially they vote, and they comprise what is essentially the popular vote. And in some cases, the popular vote winner tends to actually be the winner of most of those campaigns or elections. In some cases, it doesn't. And part of that's going to come from when we have the Electoral College. And in the Electoral College, as I said, electors or representatives, there are 538 of them. Essentially, they vote, they use all of their state's electoral votes in order to be able to elect someone to that office. And in that case, once again, it's that president or vice president of the U.S. And in order to be able to win that office, you have to have 270 of these things. So that's quite a bit, but it's actually pretty easy if you do it the right way. And so moving on, we're going to talk about, why is this good and why is it bad a little bit further here. And part of the reason why it's good is it keeps the playing field even. Even though California has 55 electoral votes and Wyoming only has 3, Wyoming, by comparison, actually has more power in this election than California would. And a quote to kind of back that up comes from researcher Walter Williams, and he said that the Electoral College, for example, Wyoming citizens are disproportionate in weight in a presidential election, or essentially put another way, Wyoming, a state with a population of about 600,000 people, has 1 member in the United States House of Representatives and 2 senators, which gives the citizens of Wyoming 3 electoral votes, or 1 for every 200,000 people. By comparison, California, our most populous state, has 39 million people with 55 electoral votes, essentially breaking down to 1 vote per 715,000 people. So by comparison, Wyoming has a much larger control of the electoral college, or at least it keeps it fair in checks and balance on that front of things, by comparison to a big state like California. In addition, it also protects votes from hacking, so that way, so people who hack make it easier, to not be able to tamper with elections and take advantage of readily available information. And so by that, I'm trying to say that, in a quote from Hans von Spakovsky, it would be more difficult to tamper with voting systems on a nationwide basis than to hack into a handful of databases in crucial swing states. So there's a little bit of that there as well in voter protection. However, the opposing viewpoint regarding this topic is that the Electoral College doesn't necessarily serve the people. And we're going to talk about that a little bit further here, in that, according to Matt Pierce and James Madison, by the way, from quite some time ago, essentially what they said was that although the Three-Fifths Compromise had given the slave states strength representation in the House of Representatives, slaves couldn't vote. So in a national popular election, northern states would have more voting power than southern states. And so essentially the latter would have no influence on the score of elections. And so in this graphic, essentially 3/5 does not necessarily equal 1 person because they couldn't vote anyway. So in that case, it wasn't always, being able to help voter turnout or candidates win elections based on how many people they were serving or campaigning for. And then also what this did was it also rendered the popular vote useless. And according to David Savage, in 2000, Vice President Al Gore won 539,000 more votes than Texas Governor George W. Bush. Mind you, this is in the popular vote. However, Bush won the presidency because he squeaked out a victory in Florida, which had enough electoral votes to make him president. And of course, with the help of the U.S. Supreme Court, that decision also stopped a recount giving him the majority of all the electoral votes. And then the system nearly worked in the opposite direction 4 years later. Had John F. Kerry won 60,000 more votes in Ohio, he could have won the White House, even though President Bush won 3 million more votes than his Democratic challenger. So what this means is that essentially, even though you can win more votes than the popular vote, it doesn't mean anything. Essentially, it has absolutely nothing to do with the Electoral College or anything to do with that. It all breaks down to how many of those electoral votes you get, and once again, you need 270 to win. So, in conclusion, when you vote this coming November, now you know what the Electoral College is, what the pros and cons are of the Electoral College, and then of course, we've now started a conversation that you may have next November when you all go to vote. Thank you.